Hey YouTube, Kira here, bringing you all an update to my Lianorn Cardfight Vanguard deck profile for post-Blazing Dragon Reborn. I did a deck profile a little while ago for just what we had to work with the trial deck and all of the support before DBT06, but now with the release of the booster set, I'm able to update the Lianorn deck with the new cards we got in the set to power up the deck, which its main purpose is to boost your Vanguard with all of your back row grade 1s and then be able to restand them and just hit for some pretty big pressure. So grade 1s are definitely the big focus for this Stoicheia deck, and the new Lianorn just makes it so you have some good consistency to keep in your hand along with those other grade 1s. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the ride deck, our starter is still the Announcing Wind of Spring Corfi, the standard when rode upon. If you went second, draw a card. Our grade 1 is Budding of Pleasant Sounds, Gracia. When it's rode upon by Brilliant Tune, Rakina, you may call this card to rearguard. So with this, you just have a free grade 1 you can call to set up in your back row. And during the battle, this unit boosted to Vanguard, it gets plus 5,000 power. Our grade 2 is Brilliant Tune, Rectina. When rode upon by a unit with Lianorn in its name, you can Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 1 or less from your drop zone, and call it to rear. So whether you heal a card by the time you're on grade 3, or just used it for a discard cost, you can call it back onto the field, setting up 2 of the 3 grade 1s you'll need for your play, with our main grade 3 now in the deck being the Grand March of Full Bloom Lianorn, along with the copy that I'm running in the ride deck. I also run 3 additional copies in the main deck, with this card being the real setup compared to the last Lianorn that allowed it to be rode upon and regarded as Grand March and Full Bloom Lianorn. But this one gives you a Counterblast 1, draw a card, choose a card from your hand, call it to rear, or discard it, so that it can just give you more setup, giving you a draw, and as long as before you were going to call anything else out, you still have that card in your hand, you can call it out and have that option. And then when this unit attacks, you Soul Blast 1, discard a card from your hand, and boost this unit with all of your back row stood units and with boost. And if you boosted this unit with 3 or more units, it gets drive +1 until the end of the battle. And at the end of the battle, choose 2 your back row rear guards and stand them. So it's basically the same as the other Lianorn. Just that draw power definitely does help if you're just short on a little bit of consistency, whether your opponent, used prison to imprison the grade 1s and you don't have enough to get them back, or you have the option to, when they were retired on the field, to have some draw and then call those units back onto the field also. For the other grade 3s I run in the deck, also running 4 Clapping Dragon. When it's placed on a front row rear guard from hand, if your back row has 3 or more units, Counterblast 1, draw a card, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this unit gets plus 10,000 to end of turn. So this is really one of the best cards to have set up just for a unit that can attack against your opponent, being 23k on its own, but then after you restand the grade 1s, you have just more pressure against them altogether. So definite 4 because, once again, it's draw power and just easy setup for the front row. For the grade 2s, the only grade 2 that I actually run in the deck is 4 copies of Blooming Petal, Carophilus. I thought of some of the other grade 2 options just for like restand power as well, but what I noticed while playing this deck is you definitely will drain the soul very quickly, whether it be with Lianorn or even just the other cards in your ride deck or some of the other units that we run. So Carophilus just definitely helps for that replenish. When placed on rear, if your soul has no cards, soul charge 2. That's all it takes just for you to be back in the game with some of the resources that you needed using this card. So definite 4 for that setup. Like I said, you can adjust the numbers with some of the other grade 2s for more of a pressure option, but she still comes in handy just providing that soul charge buildup for the Stoicheia deck. Moving on now to the grade 1, still running 4 copies of the Lively Rhythm Biara. With this card, when this unit attack, it boosted hits a Vanguard. Put a grade 2 or less from your hand to your soul and draw a card. So you just have, once again, pressure. When the attack of this unit boosted hits a Vanguard, you put a grade 2 or less from your hand to your soul and draw a card. So then you have that pressure with the Vanguard, since it would also be boosting the Vanguard with this card and hits that Vanguard that you're attacking against. And all you have to do is put a grade 2 or less from your hand to the soul, and you get draw power. So it's another way to build up soul. It's more, your opponent has to let the attack hit though. But if you're going for a big pressure attack with your Vanguard and your opponent doesn't have the guard and the attack does hit, then you can definitely make up for it with this card. For some of the other units, I run 3 of the new Congratulatory Performance Secus. When this unit boosts to Vanguard, you can Soul Blast 1, choose one of your opponent's grade 2 or less rear guards not being attacked, move it to guard circle, and it cannot be moved, and this unit gets plus 5,000 until end of turn. So you're basically making your opponent guard for that rear guard, and then making it so they're either, going to invest in the guard because of this card. It does take up the Soul Blast. That's another reason why I am running Carophilus, to make up for that soul build up. But once again, just another way to take care of some of those answered resources. If your opponent's unsure or not whether they want to go for that, intercept or just guard in total, you'll make them happen with that, since you have the boost for that Vanguard that your opponent's going up against and making them guard with it. And I also have 3 copies of Performing Petal Diantha. I wanted to potentially run a 4th copy of this card. I have 1 copy of Recorder Raccoon, more of a budget option for people. Just when it boosts Lianorn, your opponent can't intercept. So I have 1 copy of this included along with the Performance Petal Diantha. When placed on rear from hand, if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater, counter +1, choose a grade 3 or less from your drop and call it to rear guard. So this could be set up potentially with the older rear guard we have for the grade 3 in the trial deck, since the trial deck Lianorn has a rear guard plus 5,000, but it's just another way to have that grade 3 or less option also for Clapping Dragon to be called, and then being it's placed in the front row, having more draw power because of it. And during your turn, if you have 2 or more grade 1 or less rear guards, this unit gets plus 5,000, providing an immense boost for not only your Vanguard, but for when you restand it and attack against your opponent. For some of the lower numbers for the grade 1s, I also run 2 copies of Marching Debut Pierrette. During your turn, if you have 3 or more grade 1 or less rear guards, it gets plus 5,000. Just another plus 5,000 option, just like your Diantha, for the additional boost. Having 13k, 13k, and then potentially another 13k to boost your 13k Vanguard is pressure all in itself for that 1 attack against your opponents. And then lastly, for the new support for Diantha, 2 copies of Ensemble of Smiles Amali. When this unit boosts, if you have other grade 1 or less rear guards, this unit gets plus 2,000 to end of battle. Then if they boosted a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, counter +1, soul +1, and draw a card. More draw power. If you wanted to put in more copies of this card, you could try taking out the Pierretta, but once again, it takes up counter blasts along with the soul blast, which you're going to use a lot of those for Lianorn to begin with. That's why I mixed and matched some of the numbers of the different units along with this card. And then for the other grade 1, running 3 copies of the new Custodial Dragon, just the Sentinel choice, along with 1 Elementaria Sanctitude for the option of being able to block a triple drive attack. This deck, I actually have used this card against a lot because Lianorn almost guarantees a triple drive attack every turn, making an easy guard, ironically, against this deck, but still very, very useful because there are other decks you'll go up against, especially the grade 4 decks, so you'll want the Elementaria Sanctitude to guard against them. And then for the trigger lineup, running 8 critical, so 4 of the Melodia Palmyra, just for, once again, one of the fitting triggers for the deck, and 4 of the Aspiring Maiden Elena, so you have more of a soul charge option. You really want to, just boost with grade 1s to begin with for this play, so you don't really use the soul charge build with this as much, but you can do it early game, potentially to set up a little more soul, otherwise it's just another 15k critical to guard with. And also running 3 draw triggers just for the shield power. That's why we're using the Serene Maiden, Lena. And lastly, for the heals, 2 copies of the new Rhythmica Kiwi, I find very fitting for the deck, and 1 of the Alchemic Hedgehog, and 1 Fairy Asher for the different trigger options for being able to guard with additional shield against either a unit with additional critical or the multiple attacks, with our over trigger being the Bless Favor for the heal power, and then the additional +10 to the front row they can provide as well. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Once again, it's a really awesome deck. I believe we'll be getting a little more support for Lianorn in set 7, but the main focus from that set will definitely be Drajuled and some of the other decks. But what we get will definitely be updating the deck around then also. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira Qualia out.